Well, I'm grateful to be here having this conversation with you to reflect on your journey to this point. And I know you shared some things with me before, and I I um I relate to this interesting tension that we feel when we're creating something, that there is this like constant reinvention and or new pieces of the story that are getting revealed, to where it is this kind of thing that's alive in itself, and we're needing to continue to catch up to speed on like, what is the story I'm telling about what I'm building, you know? And I'm grateful to be here in this moment where it sounds like you're in a moment where you're saying like, I think the story, like there's something alive in the way the story wants to be told at this time. And you've just moved into this beautiful house, and you're in like this interesting transitional moment and stepping into being a steward of this land, which is, it sounds like it's adding a new dimension in some ways to the way you're thinking about what it means to do this work. So yeah, those are some of the things that stuck out to me in what you shared. But I'd love to start by hearing what's alive for you in this moment as you're thinking about telling the story of Lev, and also of what is wanting to flow through you through your work at AVF.
Yeah, thank you. Well, the first thing is, it is a big, it matters who I'm talking to, you know, and so I really appreciate, you know, feeling trust and that warmth and that sense of that you care about this work and that you believe in it, and that it connects to what's important and meaningful to you in your life. So I think that's what's really at the center of what I'm wanting to experience myself. Ever since I was little, I've always wanted to have meaningful conversations, and how do you go searching for that? But when it happened, I could feel it. You know, there's a certain, you know, getting chills, or a feeling of you know, intimacy, and a feeling of I remember Barbara Marx Hubbard talking about vocational arousal. So there's, you know, the sense of our vocation, you know, the sense of calling to do something meaningful in our lives that's connected to something important, that's beyond ourselves, that's connected to how much we love life, the sacredness of life, and to take care of it. So to come together with that intention is something that's I've always wanted to follow, and to meet people where I experience that. So it's meaningful to have that reflection and feel like we're doing the same work on this, on our journeys, in a larger sense. But yeah, as you were talking, I was just kind of leaning back and feeling like, yeah, this is a new moment of, yeah, moving into this home, and stewarding this land after 6 years of, you know, first purchasing it and then having to do a whole process. And the first step was actually prayer and gratitude, building a sweat lodge with people in our local community, and my mentor, Jake Singer, and making offerings here on the land, and just saying thank you. And before this land, there was a previous place that I lived in the Hudson Valley where I was just renting, and I had that's kind of where I had the sense that I want to live on land. I mean, before that, I was in Boston, you know, growing up in Boston, and then I went to BU and worked in addiction treatment for a year after college, and got this sense of, you know, from the reading I had done in college and about healing and the importance of connecting with nature, as you know, for so many reasons. So the work of Thomas Berry really was core for me, and it helped me to see, like, it's really important to get out of the city. And you know, I was just remembering people who were struggling with addiction, you know, having residential treatment programs that are in the same communities where they were finding drugs or getting into addiction. And it's like, that's really challenging. To how do you repattern yourself if you're in that same environment? And so, you know, getting out of that environment. So that's in a lot of ways where this sense of, I want to be in a healing space and support that healing process for myself, and build a community of people who are doing that and evolving ourselves wherever we are on the path, you know, struggling with challenges in life, and or, you know, being in a place of leadership but needing to be renewed and to keep stretching and going further. You know, that was the sense of hearing a calling to land, to being in a have a relationship with land, and a relationship that's rooted in healing ceremonies, sitting in circles with people, building community, that is on a particular piece of land, and building these relationships, you know, from that rooted place. And then, you know, there's been kind of cycles of, you know, renting a place where I built a relationship with land, and then, you know, having that transform, and finally getting to this point where we were working towards it, my wife and I, and now we're here, and it's like a different feeling of, you know, a new era that's opening, and still it's at the beginning of bringing people here, but there's a sense of rootedness, you know, for me and our family, that extends out into the community. So I'll just say that, I guess. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting when, you know, we live in a society, especially in the US, that has this very fluid relationship with place, right? And we do often have this mobility that a lot of other cultures don't, and often to follow career opportunities. There's what my sense is. And so it's interesting for you to be in this moment of like choosing where you're going to plant roots, and also seeing the ways in which I think you're seeing a new level of foundation that you're building, that will allow, I know you have this visual of a medicine tree that's kind of been along the path, continuing to give you a sense of like, what am I building, and what is the spirit of what I'm building? So I don't know if there's more you kind of want to say about that medicine tree visual and this, and obviously the fellowship itself is called Deep Roots. So what do roots mean to you? Like, and how does it relate to this visual of the medicine tree?
Yeah. So I first heard that phrase from Michael Meade, maybe 15 or 20 years ago, on a talk he was giving about the spiritual path of, you know, finding meaning and truth, and making sense of life ultimately, and that there's places where, well, he was talking about the deep meaning of orthodox, actually, and or the roots of that word orthodox, and that it means literally the right way. Whereas like paradox means, I think, something about two ways, right? And hearing that word orthodox was like, wow, that's what it means, the right way. And that people who have that sense of orthodoxy are saying, this is the right way, and your way is not the right way. So, you know, there's certain trees, so to speak, that people get to on the path where they stop and say, everyone has to come and be part of this tree, or this community, or this religion, or this way of thinking. And he was saying that's, a point on the path. And then if you go further, then you get to the medicine tree, which is the tree behind the tree. It's the kind of the archetypal hologram that is one thing, but it's ever changing. It's ever alive. It's like fire or water. The elements of life that water is something that is tangible, but it's always changing. Same thing with fire. You can't bottle it up. I mean, you can, but then it loses some of its properties of aliveness.
Yeah.
Its life-giving energy. And so this symbol of the tree of life, it's really I've seen it in every culture that I've ever connected with, through books or travel or meeting people. The tree of life is a symbol that everywhere around the world people can relate to it. And so the medicine tree, he was saying, is the place where all of the cultures and spiritual traditions, Jesus and Buddha and Moses and all of the leaders are all sitting on the branches and laughing and telling jokes and sharing stories, and no one's in charge, and so that's an aspirational ideal, because there's our humanness and our personalities need to be worked out. But so that's where that phrase came. But it related to, I think, I heard that about the medicine tree after it was a few years later, after having this vision with my teacher Hawk's brother of these old growth trees sprouting up out of the ground. And the context was this shamanic journeying into what would it mean for there to be peace. What would it look like? What would it feel like to have peace in the Middle East? This was in 2006. We were sitting together, and there was violence happening at that time, and now there's still violence happening, cycles and cycles. So it was a very emotional inquiry. There was a lot of tension in the room, and he was able to help us channel that into a meditative experience where we all were imagining, dreaming into it. And that's what came up for me, was I saw this Bedouin man actually standing in the desert, looked like the south of Israel. I'd been there before, and he was like a shepherd, with a staff and a cloak, and it's very mystical kind of vision. And then all of a sudden, this tornado came and was spiraling around, like from the distance, and then it went, and he was right in the center of it, like the eye of the storm. And in that moment, the energy was such that this blue light, sound, vibration exploded out of his heart in all directions. And I don't know, when on some dimension, that happened, and it just started to travel, and then other people's hearts kind of burst open as they received that wave. Then they experienced it too, and it traveled through all these lands, and eventually surrounded the whole earth as this like vibrational skin of healing around the whole earth. And as soon as it encapsulated the whole earth, this like pulse went, like a defibrillator when there's someone has a heart attack.
Yeah.
Like this pulse went to the center of the earth, like revitalizing, you know, in some ways, the way I see it now is it's more about revitalizing our human earth relationship. So it's not so much that the earth is not alive. I think the earth is very much alive right now. But I think that pulse was like this reactivation of our solidarity between humans. Thomas Berry calls it the integral earth community. So humans, the human family, the more than human family, the earth beings living as a living being, that we're all one organism. And then there's the work of Jose Argüelles and Teilhard de Chardin, who talks about the noosphere, right? That the human family is the mind of the earth. So we are of the earth. We're not separate. But we have a role to play, just like in the body. There's different organs, where the brain and all the different internal organs and everything's moving. So that solidarity, that covenant, covenantal relationship between the earth and humans, and life, with life itself. That's maybe how I'm seeing it, seeing the words that represent what that was 20 years ago that I was seeing. So that pulse, and then there was like these, like a heart attack, or this vibrational energy from the center of the earth kind of began rippling out to the crust, and these literal like cracks and fissures opened up in the earth, and old growth trees, like from the Lord of the Rings, just started walking out of these cracks from the earth and reforesting the places that had been deforested, and where there needed to be healing on the land, and deserts, and so that was this vision in 2006 that I saw, and it was very clear and overwhelming in some way, but also very exciting, because I'd already been studying and reading in college a lot of these themes around human ecology and globalization and social justice, and what's going on, and how do we make it better, and so that kind of was this symbolic, visceral experience of kind of a pathway forward. But then I didn't know what to do with it, and except over these years of working with people on their individual journeys of growth in a way that's connected to vocation and what's really meaningful to you, and how do you continue to be committed to it, over time, and grow something, a project, an organization, a business, in service to life. How do you do that? And then working with groups and being connected to community organizing work, the image of the roots, and how forests are so resilient and wise. The palpable feeling of walking through the redwood forest. My experience is there's wisdom there. There's hundreds and thousands of years of life continuing, and I would say that's wisdom. When there's life figures out how to continue to live with beauty and peace. There's a natural conflict that happens in nature, but there's a sense of balance in those ecosystems. So the redwood trees and many other tree ecosystems, the roots are connected. And that's a principle that's it's a simple fact, but it's profound. And then we can look at it and say, just with like this teaching of biomimicry that is used, in inventing technologies. But I've really looked at it in terms of social technologies. And so when we look at an interconnected root system and we look at the relationship between roots and the soil and the mycelium, for me, that's a teaching of how do we create social technologies of connectedness, of partnership, that are resilient and healing for our human family. I recently read an article by David Orr, who's the head of the environmental science department at Oberlin College, and he was talking about we won't be able to fix or address the environmental crisis without addressing the crisis of democracy. And so nature and people and nature and culture, it's one. We're connected. So we have to be able to work together, in order to work with nature. So that's where this very strong vision of us being like the roots of a forest kind of inspired me. And said, how can we be like that? And I didn't know. But then experiencing ceremony and traveling around the world and reading about indigenous cultures and all around the world, including in Europe, partnership-based cultures have ceremonies and cultural practices that do just that weave our relationships of care and inspiration and a renewal of that sense of life. So it's there. It's not something actually that we need to necessarily reinvent from nothing, but of course, culture and story and kind of myth, it's always reinventing itself, like a fire or looking at a river, right? It's alive, so it has to be tended to, and that's what oral tradition is, right? Oral tradition is, the living story that you can't put it on the shelf and just let it sit there, because then we're not enlivened by it, by the experience of culture. That needs to be constant.
And responding to the moment.
Yeah, exactly. If it gets too rigid, and this is going into the Tao Te Ching teachings of behaving like nature. If the things that are too rigid are dead or brittle, trees and wood that is brittle, it's like a standing dead tree. It doesn't have any sap flowing in it. And so with orthodoxy, when it gets rigid, it's not resilient. It's not flexible with time and listening to what's needed in the moment.
Yeah. How has your understanding of the work, when you started this work, we were in a different moment in time, I'm sure, than kind of where we are now, and a lot has changed because we're in a world where there's not a lot of solid ground, it feels. And so how has that influenced how you think about what the work is in service of? I know you said it's like in service of life, in service of rootedness, in service of this ecumenical kind of vision of, bringing wisdom traditions together.
Yeah.
But how do you, and see in light of what's happening in the 3D world.
Yeah. This is the third year of doing this Deep Roots Fellowship. So 2027 will be the fourth year. And so the first year was the election, presidential election. And so at the end of that year, I guess in November, we found out. And so that came into the circle, people processing that. And then the second year, we were in 2025, we were in the first year of the Trump administration, this second year, the second term of his presidency. And it was a lot to hold. People who care about life in so many ways and what was going on, and then how do we hold something, and by the summer of that year, I found myself feeling like this energy inside of me was kind of, almost like a dog, like I actually am a dog in the Chinese calendar. So, when you see a dog like digging a hole, right? Just like incessant. I had this feeling in me like of digging and looking, like searching. I was like, if I'm holding space for people in these times, I need to deepen my roots. And actually, we didn't have, in that second year, the name Deep Roots had not emerged. It was actually the climate leadership cohort journey. And, part of what was happening in the beginning of that year with the fellowship was an inquiry about the language, the word climate, and the attacks on language that were happening on the federal level. And so part of it was a response to that, and learning, the danger, the issues with free speech in a sense. And but then it also catalyzed a sense like, actually, this work is deeper than just talking about climate. I mean, climate's part of it. And so that kind of created a inquiry about, or that led to the name Deep Roots, and fellowship too. This sense of being fellows with each other, in fellowship with each other, and that language, Deep Roots, when it emerged and landed, I thought, wow, this really, I can feel it in my body, because we're bringing in the symbology of the old growth trees that have deep roots. And then that digging that I was saying, where it brought me was ultimately to the work of Riane Eisler and her book, The Chalice and the Blade. And then from there, she created a framework of partnership societies and dominator societies. And it's rooted in archaeology, mainly of Greece and different parts of the Middle East and Europe, of 6, 8, 10, 20, 30,000 years of archaeology that you could, I think she calls it feminist archaeology, but it's certain archaeologists that uncovered, and this is all very well researched. It's it can't really be argued that there were goddess worshipping cultures in Crete, especially, and there is a myth that was mythical Atlantis, the island of Crete, But from an archaeological perspective, it's the symbol of the chalice. And so that's the name of this book, The Chalice and the Blade. The symbol of the chalice is the symbol of the sacredness of life and uplifting and having our culture be oriented towards life and celebrating life. And the chalice is a symbol of the womb and holding life as sacred, and water is sacred, and the societies that were focused on a reverence for life, not that there wasn't conflict at all, but the orientation in what people were looking at was towards partnership. And it wasn't actually a matriarchy where women were in control or dominating. It was literally egalitarian partnership society of a balance between the masculine and the feminine. And the masculine, the men, had also prominent roles and respected roles in society, but they were oriented towards respect and protection of women and protection of life, and service and stewardship of life. So that was in Greece, and then there's also evidence all throughout old Europe, what they call like Paleolithic times. So for me, this was not that I hadn't connected to some degree with those ideas, but at that moment a couple of years ago, I was needing deeper roots myself to say, how did we get here to this I don't want to label it with names that are but to have this kind of rigidity and control and violence, and both physical violence with tanks and guns and militaries, and also the violent emotional violence and language and the disrespect that is happening on the public stage, in a way that matters. It's not just people who are acting in a way that it feels like they're just playing in a sense, but they're playing with the life of the whole planet. And so it's appalling, ultimately. And so how do we get here? That was, I had to, not that I didn't know, but I needed to go deeper to, find new sources of, wider roots, go deeper. They need more water. They need more nourishment. They need more stability. And I found it in that Riane Eisler's work. And there's even a weaving in of, well, so what happens is, what happened in those cultures is that there was a dominator society that came in, and I know from the steppes and harsher environments where harsher cultures, hierarchical cultures, patriarchal cultures, with warrior gods, masculine oriented gods, came in, and there's very reasonable understanding of how those cultures developed in harsher environments. So there was this trauma from nature that happened for those peoples, and then they brought that into more abundant environments where there was agriculture and warmth and more sun, and so there's that understanding of how culture and nature are
Interwoven, or yeah.
interwoven. And so there's a very deep study of how those dominator societies re-engineered the core, the DNA, the cultural DNA, the stories of partnership and the symbolic, the gods and goddesses, the archetypal beings that were worshipped. For example, the image of the bull was an image of the divine masculine, the fertility and fecundity of the masculine principle, and then there's that connection with the feminine, and then through that, life continues. And so there was rituals throughout the year. In spring, there's Beltane. In May, right? That the return of life and abundance, and then throughout the year that happens. And then that bull with horns is in the Christian mythology is turned into the devil. And so, whoa, that's so, it's actually so simple, that, wow, that's what's happened over 2,000 years is, or more, actually 6,000 years, is this symbolic re-engineering so that we have toxic masculinity. So there's a devil, and then there's a king that tells everyone what to do, and that's what's happening right now in a large sense. And we have this split personalities that we are struggling with. We have mental illness, when we need to first understand that that we are connected to, and so we're connected to a lineage of partnership societies. And so the dominator society lineage, creates these stories that say it's just in our nature actually to be violent. That's just who we are. We're selfish, we're violent, greedy human beings. That's what a human being is. And that's our human nature. And then, social Darwinism and this sense of studying, certain monkeys, right, and apes that are, it's like, oh, see, they're like that, so that's where we come from. Whereas, when she studies the bonobo monkeys, and they're much more loving with each other, and so to see it's a spectrum, right? It's not so simple, right? Yes, those qualities of being violent are in they're in they're yeah in they can be activated, they can be supported through our cultural and social systems, but they can also be downplayed, and we can focus on peace and creative use of language and finding ways to be in partnership. It's a spectrum, and so for me to connect that year with the larger context of what was happening, to connect, to say, okay, there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of fear that's happening right now, and that's purposeful and intentional. It's been that way for thousands of years, actually. Our societies, the dominator societies, want to generate fear to create the power dynamics. So I need to be aware of that, but then focus on that deeper root, which is a sense of lineage, that it's not something that we need to reinvent. How are we going to get out of this? How are we going to survive? We don't need to come up with something out of the blue, that it's in our ancestral heritage to be in partnership. And so that goes back, even further in some ways than the dominator societies. It goes back, 6, 8, 10, 20, 30,000 years. And then even before that, the oral traditions of indigenous people. So to be connected to that, and then there was this strength that I felt, and then to be able to share that in the circle, that we can remember where we come from, and that's really where strength and the kind of power that has been passed down to navigate as partnership, identifying people to survive and to be resilient. Cultures all around the world, the mystical traditions, the traditions of life. There are always stories of the resistance movements and how you have to navigate hiding and secrecy and keeping wisdom and life-affirming joy alive in the midst of darkness and oppression. So the Jewish heritage where I grew up with the Maccabees, and during Roman times there were there's Rabbi Akiva and different stories of teachers that had to hide, live in caves for 10, 12 years, and when things were going on, then they had to flee and preserve knowledge. And the capoeira of Brazil came from the need to stay healthy and learn a martial art to resist slavery. But it's just a dance. It's just music. We're playing. We're just enjoying ourselves. When really, in order to tell the slave masters, we're not actually training ourselves to resist and to overcome slavery and to liberate ourselves. So around the world, right? There's resistance movements that can find ways, and in a sense, that's what social justice is about. But then there's an oscillation between, having it be, secret knowledge. There's spiritual knowledge, and then there's also, knowledge and around how do we transform our society, and it's all connected in some ways. And social justice is where we have to actually go out and fight or engage with the system. And then there's all these teachings in the Tao Te Ching and the martial arts tradition of, how effective is fighting? If we fight, then are we going to win against tanks and the technologies that they have? How do we do that? So then there's negotiation and bringing in partnership techniques, and it's there's never one strategy that's going to work, right? It's about listening to the moment and trusting. And so maybe I should, that was going on and on there. I don't know, what do you
No, those
think?
are all good threads to like go a little layer. I mean, what I'll bring in a little bit of my own experience. I was recently in Italy and like kind of studying the history of the Renaissance, right? And the Renaissance was, this time in the Dark Ages. Like I've kind of been like, oh, that was the era before that where knowledge was not really celebrated. There wasn't a lot of arts, like it was a dark time. They called it the Dark Ages. And the Renaissance came partially because there was a revisiting and like going back to like Greek philosophers and like realizing there was this wisdom from this other time that could be reimagined and like a new lens by which to understand this ancient knowledge.
Re-enlivened, yeah.
For the time that made sense through the cultural context of the time where humanism was kind of on the rise. And so it's like, how do we understand these ideas through our current era? So like, I think that's really cool that you're having this moment of like, you went deeper to realize like, we don't actually need something new. We just need a reimagining or a renewal of a way of being and a way of relating and connecting that actually is deeply intuitive. There's an intuitive knowing in us that this is actually a way that we like have known to relate and connect to each other, and we just need to bring it back to the surface and find other people who have the will, the vision, the openness, the courage to say, like, let's be the ones to kind of bring this back into the light, and that's, the community that you're building. And the other thing that I think that other thing that I'm hearing as a thread in what you're saying, and I know we've kind of talked about this, of you're drawing upon so many different bodies, like you're drawing upon like history, and you're drawing upon like study of ecology, and then you're drawing upon your own lived experience of being at a rehabilitation or a like treatment center, working at a treatment center. You're having these visions that you're not really sure, like, how do I translate this to reality? This is in like some other dimension that I'm understanding this like vision of these trees and these roots, but like, how do I land this in our current time? And then how do I evolve it to what our current time is? I mean, I think this work, I think that's the beauty of what you're doing, is you're pulling upon all these different dimensions and even understanding like, how do you do social movements, right? Like, how have those been designed and grown over time? And we were talking a little bit about the ecumenical like vision that you have. And a lot of this, we're in a moment where there's like separation from humans and nature, right? Separation between nations, separations between religions, like this sense of division and fragmentation that we have in our society, I think feels very acute. And that's what we're observing in the 3D world. And then meanwhile, I know our conversations have also been like, how do you connect the inner and the outer, right? And I think that was one of the things when I came back around, you said like, oh, wow, that was cool that you like came back around. We initially met. And then I was like, hey, I'm inspired by you. And one of the things was like, I'm not seeing a lot of people connecting the inner and the outer dimension. And not only doing that for themselves, but guiding other people to in that journey of how do you connect the inner and the outer.
Yeah.
And that is like, I think on an individual level, if we go on some path to dealing with our own fragmentation inside of ourselves, then like that hopefully can lead to less fragmentation in the 3D world. And I've been on my own journey around that. And so I've been, in spiritual and healing circles that can sometimes feel like they get to the place where it is like, to what end, to what benefit of society, right? Yeah. And you can just stay in that kind of like healing hole, or like just thinking that you're never really going to, move beyond these traumas or these wounds. And not really feeling like you have a lot to offer society as a result of continuing to stay in that place of woundedness. Meanwhile, being in social justice or social impact circles where I see a lot of burnout, I see a lot of people imposing a sense of like, I need to change this system, or I need to change, this problem, or I need to change this organization. And there is even that masculine dominance energy to the way we think about affecting change. That to me, I've kind of felt like something about this is off.
Yeah.
So what I appreciate about what you're doing is that it's addressing kind of these things. And so I'll just open that and see what that brings up for you in terms of this like connection between inner and outer and your own journey to doing that kind of like, how do I align the inner more with the outer?
Yeah, I really appreciate how you just named all those things. It's exciting and my mind was like, oh, and this part, and I want to say all these things, like connect, resonate with that inquiry.
Yeah.
And maybe I will just kind of
Jump around. Yeah.
just name a couple things and then weave it together.
Sure.
But yeah, so this importance of rites of passage
Yeah.
and ceremony, just name that, and then prophecy and ancient wisdom traditions talking about this time. And then so these are, if we had a whiteboard, maybe we'll create a graphic for the interview, but and then a third thing is, the poly crisis, the climate crisis, but it's more than the climate crisis at this point, right? It's the poly crisis, the convergent crises in every sector of society, every aspect of life is at a breakdown threshold. We're headed for breakdown, and we need that to transform, to break through, in order for life in its integrity to continue. So those are I think, was that 4 things, right? We have ceremony, rites of passage, we have prophecy, we have
Polycrisis.
the polycrisis. So those are 3 things, and I'm sure and then the inner and outer work, which is, so that's the person that is on the journey of interfacing with all of this. So maybe you can remember and hold those things as we navigate that landscape. So 2006 is when I had that visionary experience with these old growth trees, and then I started doing some training in life coaching. I was studying with hawks in shamanic healing, which was more of a personal healing path, but obviously influencing work, professional work. And then just reading widely and being aware of this 0 point, magnetic field around 2012, in the zeitgeist, so to speak, the sense of this is something that's being talked about on YouTube and all what is 2012, and so I was really focused on that inquiry, and there's the doomsday, and then there's what was inspiring, was people talking about prophecy in the sense of ancient wisdom traditions from all around the world, but at least 2,000 years old traditions, but going back, India, Egypt, the Mayans and Central and South America, even Judeo-Christian stories and teachings, all saying, converging, that pointing, all of these wisdom traditions. If there was a map, it would say right here, it's right here, and they're talking about a map in time. So there's calendar systems saying this time that you're living in right now, 2012, and not just 2012, but there's a culmination, and then there's something that does come after. I think what was misinterpreted in the 2012 popular mindset was this is the end. It's just, and a lot of that has to do with the Western culture dominant paradigm. Our relationship with death is such that we're scared of death, right? We don't know how to. It's not a cyclical understanding of death and rebirth, and that's connected to rites of passage, because we're not practicing that transformation in our lives where a part of us dies, our psyche dies, or parts of our psyche die, so that we can be reborn into a new stage of our life and into maturity. So then that gets amplified and projected to the larger society where there's endings, and the end doesn't mean a new beginning. Like Michael Meade talks about in a story, the end means happily ever after, or let's start the story again. Like a child, my son, we finished the story again, let's read it again. It's keep the fire alive. So that 2012, when there's, same thing in 2000, right? There was like, all the systems are going to end, and it's going to be the end. Oh my God, the end. And so it's like, and maybe connected to the idea that the world was flat. It's like you're just literally, it's going to just walk off, and it's a cliff into nothingness, into the abyss, the unknown, which is so terrifying, right? We don't have a practice of breathing into the unknown. So this is kind of all related. So in 2012, I was learning about all that, and I did feel like I got caught in some eddies myself personally. I was also at that same time dealing with chronic Lyme's disease, which has a effect on your psyche and your emotions. And so there was kind of a perfect storm for me of being taken down, another downward experience, into a dark night kind of experience where, yes, there was a thread of, being connected to an understanding that says this isn't the end, that there is, this focus on this time from ancient wisdom, but it's a time of transformation. So that was there. I was connected to that, but to some degree, I had to go through a process within myself, an inner outer, right? This theme of inner outer, where the inner experience of the magnitude of the task that in my own life to serve and to participate in that prophetic healing journey that's thousands of years old, and to get to this moment, there was a simultaneous feeling of I didn't have what it takes. That was a core wound feeling, and then reflected in the outer. Yes, I hear that there's these prophecies, but something isn't adding up. It's too crazy. The world is too out of control. We're going to collapse. So I had an inner collapse, and I was interpreting what was happening as collapse, and that's certainly an interpretation that is rational. A lot of people rationally are saying we're in collapse, we're in breakdown,
Yeah.
and I agree. It's not that I don't agree on a certain level. So in order to not collapse, there needs to be, a wormhole, and there needs to be something, and that's what mystical traditions, that's what faith healing, that's what miracles are a study of, that there are outliers. There's things that we don't understand. There is the unknown. And instead of being afraid of it and saying, oh, we'll just put that in the closet, and like, there was a spontaneous healing from cancer. It's like, we don't understand that. We're just gonna not think about it. And so it's like, no, actually, wow. Let's like put that at the center and like, thank you. Like that life is mysterious in the, so yeah, so those are the threads. So I had this downward journey, and then that really led me, in some ways, to meet my wife and to go deeper into ceremony. I met my wife through ceremony, and that's and in a lot of ways the motivation to start the Sundance commitment, ignited on my wedding day, because there was a feeling of commitment to a life partner, and commitment to a life path, that I needed that support, in order to have a partner, that to be able to walk and to be responsible, to live up to that responsibility. I needed a spiritual support, so to speak, a path that was going to give me the strength. And so there was this downward journey, and then a deepening of commitment to, the Sweat Lodge, the Vision Quest, the Sundance, in a ceremonial life. It's like I had to grab onto it, and then that, among other things, helped me to clear the heaviness of despair and depression, little by little, over, now, the last 12 years, I would say, regaining strength, and so that's about my inner journey of rites of passage, of having to die in ways over and over again to my fear, and my shyness. There's a passage in the Gospel of Thomas that says, if you bring forth what is within you will heal you. And if you don't bring forth what is within you will destroy you. I'm grateful. I don't know how that came across my, how I read that, but when I did, it was like, whoa, like that's what's going on for me. There was this implosion, around the personal despair and the collective despair, and it was ultimately a fear of that I have something inside of me and I'm too scared to bring it out, and it's destroying me. Yes, there was, chronic illness, but I had a mentor who said, if it wasn't going to be that Lyme's disease, it would have been something else. Like there was a, I don't know, destiny. There was an imprint in my life journey that said, you have to go through this. And, again, Michael Meade talks about the wounded healer, which we hear, not just from him, but the wounded. We were just listening to that Pathless Path podcast together. So, an experience that I've had of facing suicide, feeling like I wanted to not be here anymore. That's the experience of the wounded healer saying, okay, I can relate to the deep darkness of the human experience that's not unique to me. And then there's compassion, and then there's a real desire to serve and to be part of life and to support other people on their journey, because it's real. It's really scary, right? It's really hard, and then getting out of it, there's real gratitude to be alive, and then to be able to be in other people's lives and to support them through those journeys. So rites of passage, and the second piece was the prophecy, right? So there's a lot of thinking in environmental science and ecology, and then how that all relates to movements, and how are what's going to happen, and the data that's amassed that says, holy shit, basically, like, we're effed, we're fucked. There's and that data is extremely important, right? And there's data now from, I don't know, the last 100 years, or of the breakdown of our ecological systems. But in the 1970s, it was already conclusive that the oil companies in the 70s knew. I was talking to a taxi driver in Costa Rica, and he said that to me. Yeah, they knew in the 70s. And yet, as Thomas Berry says, our culture is like a heroin addict, and the oil relationship with using energy is, it's an addiction, a collective addiction, with all the knowledge of how much it's harming our home, the earth, and our families, and mental illness and obesity, and it's all right. It's all happening as a expression of the dysfunction. So the data that says, yes, we're in breakdown, right? It's necessary, but it's pretty old, right? It's 50 years old, and then it gets better and better to see, yeah, we keep destroying our environment. But then I was just watching a presentation recently, and the conclusion of this academic who did a very coherent presentation is, our brains are maladaptive to the society that we've created. So we've created an environment, and technological, social, that is too overwhelming for us. We don't know what we're doing. And that was the end of his presentation. And so it's like, okay, I hear you, I get what you're saying, it all makes sense, but where do I go with that?
Yeah.
Where you go is, I'm depressed. That's what I was 12 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm depressed. I want to hide and kill myself, actually. That's where that led me.
Yeah.
To say, yes, I see it. And that's, when we think about activism and burnout, that's where we're hitting up against.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I get it.
Don't have hope.
So give me something. Give me something, but don't give me something that's not real.
Yeah.
Like, I need something to get through that. That's not enough. That's not sufficient. And so I agree with your analysis, but where's the wormhole?
Yeah.
I know there's a wormhole. And how do I know there's a wormhole? From the mystical, shamanic wisdom traditions, from the prophecies, from cultures that had a different paradigm, from partnership societies, from cyclical, the rebirth capacities, from spiritual evolution, that there's miracles, that if there's one miracle that has been recorded, and I've experienced miracles myself, healing, my own healing crisis, but I've also witnessed, my teacher, healing people, on their deathbed. And it's riveting. It shatters the understanding of what's possible. And so in terms of bringing these things together and weaving this thread, we can think about it as a circle. Let's put all of this into the circle, and it's a ceremonial circle. It's a sacred circle. And when we put we want to put basically the inquiry that I'm devoted to my whole life up until now, and will continue, is what circle can we cast together, and what can we bring into that circle? We need to bring all the ingredients that are going to allow us to hit the wall of we're maladaptive and say, I'm going to become adaptive. Me and we are going to, in this circle, we're going to evolve the capacities, the brain activity, the biohacking of our health and our emotional intelligence, and on every level, our capacity for telepathy as a caring group of people that can listen to each other, just like schools of fish or birds flying together, and murmurations, and as Rupert Sheldrake calls it, morphogenetic fields. So how can we function not just like trees, but like animals that move together without needing to communicate? So all of these things that we need to put them into the circle, and then be in a community of practice. Study and practice, and study and practice. And like you're saying about the inner work and the outer work, in my spiritual community, there isn't a culture of, what do you do for work, or do you do, activism work, or, there's people in different fields. It's more just about, I come to this spiritual circle to stay healthy within myself and for my family, and to have a healthy life. But we're not directly engaging. And sometimes, there's certainly exceptions. There are times when I've come together in spiritual community and prayed about fracking in New York State, supporting the moratorium, for example. So we can do that subtle activism work that's subtle, but also very practical, because it's giving us strength to continue. Same thing with right down the road, Spectacle Pond here in Sandusfield. When we first moved to the area, was the community was dealing with a pipeline that was threatening the pond, and we made prayers, and we made offerings, and I believe it was averted. It was a happy ending that time. So there's always, it's not black or white. Like in our spiritual communities, we don't talk about. Obviously, there's overlap, and what we're talking about is amplifying that overlap. Integrating even more than it already is. There are many other people in this conversation around spiritual activism, subtle activism. This conversation is certainly on the shoulders of generations of building a conversation in professional circles around our spiritual lives, and how do we do that? So bringing basically we need to bring all the ingredients that we can to bear to develop our capacities to the next level of evolution. And then the prophetic line, another weaving back of the prophetic teachings are, and not just the prophetic, but you could say, Thomas Berry and Barbara Marx Hubbard also have talked about, we're at a threshold of moving from Homo sapien to whatever you want to call it, a new form of human, a new name for what it means to be human. So, two of the names that I can think of now that are resonant with me are Homo luminous and Homo nuisphyricus, which is the from Jose Argoyes's work of the noosphere, this thinking layer of the planet, that we're actually stepping into a conscious understanding of our role as the mind of the earth. And as the mind of the earth, what do we want to be thinking on behalf of the earth, on behalf of life? So do we want to be fighting with each other, or it's the scaffolding, the social thought scaffolding of the need for peace on earth, peace within, peace among nations, within nations, in order for us to harmonize with the planet. And then the Homo luminous is an image of beings of light that reflect the sun. There's the ancient teachings of the sun being the source of life, and it's also in science and photosynthesis. But there's deep teachings about the science. I was recently reading Don Miguel Ruiz from the Four Agreements and the Toltec wisdom teachings, that the sun is every day is giving us the information, the intelligent information. In a sense, it's telepathically giving each one of us what we need. And there's teachings from all cultures that it's very important to wake up in the morning, early in the morning, and greet the sun in a sacred way. Making prayers in the morning, attuning our mental capacity to receive the guidance on a daily basis. And this is, these are the daily practice, right? In terms of telling the story and not putting it on the shelf, and just saying, oh, I did that already. It's like, what are the practices? What are the cultural and daily and weekly rhythms of life that are life-affirming, that allow us to stay in a listening mode to nature and to the sun, so that we can not be guided by our egos, but be cleansing our egos so that our egos are in service to life. Not that they don't exist, like, oh, I'm beyond my ego, but that it's a healthy relationship, that my participation in life, it's there's self-interest, right? I need to take care of myself and feel happy, and then it also transcends myself, that even the idea of self is not sufficient, right? Like, there's a boundedness to who I am. I have my own body, but self is always in relationship, with ecology, with culture.
I'm learning a lot from our discussion, and I mean, obviously, I've gotten bits and pieces of your story along the way in the conversations we've had leading to this point, but it's really nice to go like a layer deeper on like the experiences that have shaped you along the way, like the teachers who have influenced you along the way, and also I mean, your own rites of passage in the sense of like, I guess I wonder whether you like the rites of passage and the hero's journey probably have a lot of parallel elements, right? Of like going into the unknown. That's when like the mentor arrives, like kind of like the teacher shows when the student's ready, the teacher, appears kind of. But also when you put yourself into the unknown, that's often when the support can come, right? Like that's kind of helping you navigate your way into something, a new territory that you aren't familiar with. I'll just share this as like my own visual for my own journey has been very much like of climbing a mountain. And there's been like, you get to a point where there's like a base camp and you get to kind of like relax for a little bit. But then I always have this like, okay, you got to keep going, and I'm kind of like, oh, can I just stay at this base camp? But, and then in the midst of that also, my spiritual tradition, you come from a Jewish background, I come from a Christian background. And I think there was a lot of this message around like, make sure you're helping to, guide other people up the mountain. Yeah. And I think that I've had this tension in myself of like, do I go with the pack or do I go ahead of the pack? What is more of service? And for me, I think that at times I thought going ahead of the pack was like selfish or showing the pack that I was stronger than them, like somehow like there was a superiority in it or something. And yet we need those people to like go ahead of the pack, which like kind of also makes me think of the Michael Meade podcast that I feel like was validating for me, where he's like, those who often have the wisdom to offer have pulled away from the pack and been willing to go on the road less traveled. And even when there's like beyond the road less traveled in some ways, but that as the hero's journey goes, there's always also an invitation to come back to the community to share what you've learned or to guide, to do that level of guiding. So it sounds like you've had your own balance of kind of like, pulling away and coming back. And I'm also having an interesting moment of reflection in my own story. I was in the Northeast about 4 years ago, kind of in my own like moment of disorientation after I'd come back from Rwanda. And I was really not sure what was next. I was like, is this the beginning of my international life? Is it the end? I'm 40. Should I settle down? Like there was a lot of questions. That's, total common, probably midlife crisis stuff. But my curiosity at that time, that I was like, well, let me just follow one thread of inspiration. And it was like, I was interested in possibly running a retreat center one day. And so I was like, maybe I'll go like on a road trip to visit some retreat centers in the Northeast. And also I was kind of intrigued by intentional communities. And so I like weaved some stops at some intentional communities and also some retreat centers, including Kripalu. And I think at the time, when I was going to these places, I saw a lot of people, maybe were even forming these intentional communities, were pulling away completely from society. And just a rejection, like, let me just escape, basically, from mainstream society because it doesn't resonate for me. And I was like, this isn't it for me. I do feel like I want to be in the real world and also, like, I want to be straddling the worlds and be in the tension of that. And I've even felt that in my own, at another point in my life, I thought about maybe, I've always been a spiritual person, and I thought about kind of being like going into spiritual leadership early on in my journey. But people were like, you can be probably even of more service by being in the world and being a spiritual person who's in the normal world. And I've kind of always felt that, like, I need to be straddling the worlds. So that was another reason why I'm having a full circle moment. That time I was like, okay, I don't want to retreat from society or the mainstream totally. I want to find ways, people who are straddling. And so it's interesting in this moment to kind of be here with you and realize, like, you're also in that, you feel called to be in that liminal space and in those intersections as well. And I think a lot of people can't do that because they aren't, I think a lot of us still are like it's hard not to have black and white thinking. I think it's a real journey to try and figure out how to live in the liminal spaces and be in the gray and be in the both and find the middle way. So anyways, those are some of the things that are kind of like resonating about what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I'll stop there.
I mean, the phrase building bridges
Building bridges, yeah.
is, and again, the root metaphor is bridges are, the human constructed world.
Yeah.
The nature-based images are the roots.
Yeah.
The roots connecting trees and the mycelium connecting different species and metabolizing nutrients in between different environments, different realities, so to speak. So that's what enhances life. In permaculture, right? They talk about the edge. Ecosystems are where the most diversity is, and then so these black and white realities. There are distinct ecosystems. There needs to be flow. There needs to be interaction. And then I think the main word that was coming to me while you listening to you is creativity. And nature is creative. And so humans are creative. But when we kind of there's kind of a distinction that one mentor of mine in grad school, Al Bott, he has a podcast. He's really a wonderful guy. He was talking about the distinction between being a tourist, where you go somewhere and you look around, you go to the gift shop, you get ice cream, or you eat, and then, oh, this is awesome, I love it. And then you go to the next place and the next place, and being a disciple, someone or a student, and so that's a relationship. You could talk about it in different ways, but in regards to rigor, how rigorous of an engagement am I going to bring to any field of endeavor? Am I going to have a superficial, just uncommitted in a lot of ways? Is part of rigor is about commitment.
Yeah.
Am I really gonna, when it gets hard, like in the martial arts, there's a book called Mastery, and he's talking about this being an Aikido practitioner and getting to a point where there's a flatlining, there's a plateau. It's like, hey, I'm still putting in the time, but I'm not getting any better. And you think that, and then all of a sudden there's a quantum shift, but you don't know when that's going to happen. And so then it ultimately comes back to rigor and why am I doing this and what's the point of it? Am I devoted to this work? And so there's there's just layers and layers of that. And so I'm bringing that distinction in terms of looking at creativity, human creativity. It's like, oh wow, it's great to be creative. Like I like to draw pictures, I like to do creative things, but there's a tourist kind of way to engage in creativity, like, oh right, it's nice. And then there's the creativity as if our life depended on it, because it does right now. We need to be more creative as a human species and create we have to first understand what kind of creativity do we need, right? The ethics around technology is a question of choosing creative expression mindfully and in a way that's I'm bounded. That there are limits. There's boundaries that maybe should be crossed or could be crossed, but mindfully, and see what happens. And then don't just take off into outer space without seeing, well, what's the effect on that, right? There's technology is moving so quickly right now that people are making things, hey, this is so great. Let's make $1 million. Let's make $1 billion off of it. And then they don't even know 5 years later the actual impact of it. There's no medicine there. Like, medicine is old. Medicine is passed down, and you do something, and then you really reflect, like, what happened, and you talk to people like, hey, I did this, I tried that, and then this happened, and maybe this is why it happened, and I don't know, there's still a mystery there, so I better really keep thinking about it and be humble about it, and so that's the kind of creativity, right? Creativity for life, for kindness, for nurturing, for peace. That's needed right now. So let's see. Why was I talking about creativity? Because you were talking
the middle way.
Because you're talking about the middle way, right? And the black and white. And I want to escape. It's like, yes, there are moments. Exactly. It's the oscillation. It's the aliveness of yin and yang, of gray, of the dance of reality, of 3D and 5D, and
togetherness and separateness.
Yeah. And yes, we need moments of escaping for moments. Like, as a parent, I need 5 minutes, ask my wife, like, I'm not doing so well. I need to unplug. I need to tap out. And then I can reconnect, so that's a microcosm. And so, that's actually a segue to the Deep Roots Fellowship and the Alliance for a Viable Future membership community that's emerging right now. That there's this circle that we're intentionally building, that's a circle of creativity that allows us to be in this metabolizing space where I can come in here into that space and say, I'm ready to do, or I am doing, I'm engaged, and support me, like let me celebrate, help me strategize. And then there's also the person that can show up and say, I'm burnt out. Like, I need a place where I can just be me. I can grieve what's happening. So that's the larger circle, and at times that's me, both of those things, and there's all variations of that. So it's a circle of being able to be in a community of practice where we're active and we're also learning, and we're reflecting, and we're celebrating, and we're grieving, we're being human on the real path of tending to real people and ecosystems and organizations and businesses in the world, and seeing that when we do that, when we stay engaged in the outer, that in a conscious way, the inner work gets done. So we don't have to go off and do our inner work separate from our professional work, that the crucible of bringing our vocation into our profession, our sense of mission and purpose and service in the world, is transformative in the best way possible. we become who we are wanting to be. That's been my experience. I'm still evolving. We're all growing, and the person that says I'm a master is, it is my Tai Chi teacher said. His teacher said, "Don't call me master, because then I'm not learning. I'm not alive. I'm not like a fire or water. I'm not growing." So, some of these expert ideas we can let go of in this community, so that we can be constantly evolving ourselves, so that we can show up, as adaptive, resilient, creative beings who others can look to and say, "I'm confused, I'm scared, what do I do?" And I can say, "I don't have the answers, but I see a path, and I'm listening to a deeper guidance, and I'm trusting a process that's going to go step by step towards something that is nourishing and supportive." And my deeper trust and faith is that process of life, following life, a pathway of life that goes in that direction, me personally and in my microcosm of family and network, and as we grow that community, it strengthens the collective future. And so that's what we're doing in the Deep Roots Fellowship, is creating that vessel for a rite of passage to the next level of wherever you are, in a way that's taking everything we were just talking about today into consideration, and saying, well, what is the next gesture of my life? This is the first day of the rest of my life. I have this one life. I'm a sentient being. It's a gift to have life, to have, an intelligent brain and body, and to be of service in this moment, to be alive, and to strengthen that way of thinking, right? To say, hey, where am I really headed, and to have a rigorous engagement with that. To say, like, I'm a leverage point in a network, and the more intention, the degree to which I bring intention and devotion and reverence and passion and inspiration to my life, is the degree to which that leverage point is going to, activate more life. And some things can be, the impact can be proven, and other things it's a feeling of, and it's stories upon stories of, wow, there's good things happening in the community, and I can see how I was connected to that. I contributed to that, and then that feels good, and I want it to continue, and I want others to contribute to my life in a way that's supportive. Have affirmations of, blessings coming back at me for taking risks, and then I want to have a hand in that happening and amplifying other people's adventures and courageous stepping into the unknown, and have that be amplified into cultures of communities and organizations and businesses who are doing that collectively, rooted in place here in the Northeast, and in relationship with other bioregions who are rooted in place. And through that, we connect like the trees in the forest, and we have a line of sight towards a quantum shift, and if that we don't know is going to happen, but what else do we have than to put our whole 100% into a future for our children?
Beautiful. And do you want to say a little bit about anything else about the membership that's kind of the seasonal piece?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll just say it's not the membership as a structured offering is not quite ready to be offered. So I'm still kind of working out the details of how we're going to do a beta membership. But you know, the structure, the scaffolding of it is to be thinking about the journey through the seasons. That, yeah, our relationship with nature brings us into being human, remembering that what does it mean to be human, into that remembering place that we're a part of life. So the journey through the seasons, so we're connected then to nature, which is the seasons, and also time. And time is so important, to have a relationship with time that's not clock time, that's not technology time. And so it really started with this idea of the horizon point last winter. And that's a whole tangent, but this inquiry of the new year after the winter solstice. There's the winter solstice being the darkest time, and then the light returning, and then that time in January and February being a time of vision, of seeing, but not so much doing, of setting a path in motion, setting our intentions, and right, we have New Year's intentions. It's so there's something natural about that that's in the collective dominant culture, popular culture, but again, the tourist versus the rigorous engagement as a disciple, so to speak, is starting with that time of the horizon point, and having a community process, a space to do that deeper visioning work. And then that also opened me up to thinking about embracing the darkness that comes before the light comes back, and the depression and the loneliness that happens here, particularly in the Northeast. So connecting to place, like, hey, we're all going through this. It's cold, it's like, it's beautiful in the summer and we want to be out and connecting with each other. But then how do we have a conscious way of utilizing the cycles of nature, towards the end of everything we were talking about, of our creativity, of our health, of our engagement with life, inner and outer. So that embracing the darkness is another seasonal space or vessel from November towards the winter solstice, to be in community in a conscious way. So those are the two kind of elements of the membership that kind of started to come together. And then thinking about spring and summer and fall, is when the Deep Roots Fellowship has a curriculum. And so the membership will be a space where the Deep Roots curriculum will be shared also more broadly. The spring equinox of planting seeds and coming into more activity, and then summer, thinking about rites of passage. The Sundance ceremony happens in the summer, and so when there's so much sun, there's so much energy and aliveness. There's the energy that each one of us has to go to the next level. And then fall time of harvest, and then getting ready for winter and letting go. So basically having the membership be a way of being connected through the seasons, and then thinking about leadership principles and being in a community of practice, engaging with our real responsibilities and challenges in our inner life and our professional outer life, and the crucible of how that all comes together. The, um, and yeah, being in community through that journey. Yeah, and using it as a natural, just like the root system is a template, that the seasons, to really listen deeply to the seasons, is an antidote to burnout, and it's a antidote to overwhelm, and being in crisis. So following the seasons brings us into strength and well-being, as change makers, as activists.
Beautiful.
I want to say thank you, Elizabeth, for who you are, and joining the advisory circle, and choosing to come visit, and genuinely creating space in your life as you were on your travels to invest in this relationship and this work, and I just really am inspired and by your generosity of presence, and also the articulateness of your synthesis of work all around the world that you've done in this field of change making and education for transformation, and so thank you.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure, truly.